You're muted, Biba, I think.
Sorry. Okay.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining an introduction of Open Access. I'm Mabel Tang, Key Account Director for Asia Pacific. On the line today with me is my two colleagues, Chris Caswell, Senior Editor, and Ken Yap, Licensing Manager of Malaysia and Brunei. The webinar is a collaboration with the UMT Library, and we would like to thank them for their great support in making the webinar available to all of you. So before we start, okay, I have several housekeeping. So everyone is muted during the whole section to avoid any background noise, so as to achieve the best audio effect and for recording purpose. So if you have any question, please type in the question box on the control panel on your right-hand side, and the speakers will answer at the end of the presentation. At the end of the talk, when we close the webinar, there is a short survey. So highly appreciated if you can fill the survey and let us know how do you find the webinar today and what topics you would like to hear in the future. An e-certificate will be attached with the follow-up email, which will be sent to you the next day. The recording and the slides will be shared by the UMT Library later. So we are very glad to have Mr. Chris Caswell to be our speaker today. Based in Auckland, Chris has been the editor-in-chief of Pharmacoeconomics for 18 years, and he is a senior editor for Springer Nature. He is also the editor-in-chief of the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research, co-editor-in-chief of Pharmacoeconomics Open, and the consulting editor of Applied Health Economics and Health Policy. He also leads a team of professional journal editors in the fields of pharmacoeconomics, pharmacovigilance, sports medicine, and pharmacokinetics. He practiced as a clinical pharmacist for over 10 years before becoming a medical writer, and then a full-time professional journal editor with ADAS Publications in 2001. Chris has a particular interest in communication, understanding and reporting of research, and the use of social media in health communication. And he has been a regular international speaker in different events and occasions. So without further ado, I pass it to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Let me just... one second. So hopefully you can see those. Oh, 1 second, sorry. A little. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of a technical problem with my slides there. 1 second. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk about open access. I'm going to give you a brief overview of why open access is important. I'm going to talk about open science and some of the very important issues that we need to consider. Before I get into my talk, I'd like you just to quickly answer a quick question for me by going to pollev.com/Chris Caswell 095 and just typing in what is your...
Sorry, Chris, are you sharing your screen right now? Because we don't see your PowerPoint.
Okay. Oops.
There you go. We can see it now, Chris. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. So if you could go to this address here, Chris Caswell, pollev.com/Chris Caswell with 1L095. I'll just answer this question about what is your research area. Just give you a few seconds to see if it's working for you. Ah,
Yeah, I
very
put a
good.
link
Thank you.
in the chat box so everybody can go to the chat box and copy that link.
Soil sounds interesting. Yes. Okay, thank you. That's very good. Thank you very much for doing that. And then one other question going to the same link. Have you ever published a paper open access? Not 50-50. Okay, thank you for doing that. Thanks, very interesting. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to cover off today is what is open science and why it is important. Open access is just is one part of open science, but I'm just going to cover off why overall open access is important. I'm going to talk about what is open access, what do we mean when we talk about open access, what do we mean when we talk about gold open access or green open access. There are other types of open access, such as bronze open access, but the two main types that I think that I want to talk about today are gold and green. I want to talk about why to choose open access. Why is it important? And if you've then made that decision, how do you choose an open access journal? And importantly, how do you avoid publishing in what we call predatory journals, those journals that have been set up, unfortunately, to take money and only give your paper a very cursory peer review and then publish the paper. And I'll talk a lot more in detail about those as we move through the presentation. And then the other aspects of open science are data sharing, preprints, and protocols. And I will talk about those as well. So open science and open access has really been revolutionized by the digital revolution of the 21st century. You know, the increase in computer capacity and processing and data storage has really radically changed the publishing industry, even in the time that I've been an editor-in-chief. Now really there is no limit to the amount of data storage, or we've had preprint servers start up, places that you can deposit papers, open access repositories, and really the whole publishing industry has drastically changed in the last few years. So what is open science? Well, I quite like this definition because I think it's quite simple. Open science is the movement to make scientific data and research, publications and the data, the software, etc., accessible to everyone, accessible to all levels of society. So whether that's a layperson, whether it's a professional researcher, etc. That's what open science is about. It's about making data and research accessible. And why is it important? Well, it's important because it facilitates a number of concepts. It facilitates the fact that you can collaborate, that there is data to show that publishing papers open access and practicing open science improves collaboration. It improves the visibility of your research. It's a lot easier for people to read your paper if it's not behind a paywall. There's evidence to show that papers published open access have a citation advantage. There's also evidence to show that it accelerates science. People can quickly have access to your research, your papers, your data underpinning that research. It's been shown that it will accelerate science. And finally, a really important point, I think, particularly in an area that I'm interested in, is providing the ability to reproduce to data and to reproduce scientific experiments. There's been a lot of discussion in the literature about the reproducibility crisis, and that it's really hard to reproduce studies from published reports. So by making a paper open access and making the data underpinning it open, it allows reproducibility, it allows the potential to reproduce your research. Now we're going to try and show you a little bit of a little video that talks, summarize quite nicely the issue of reproducibility in science. So Mabel, can you take control for the video?
I will take the control now.
Okay.
But let me make myself presenter.
In 2011, a team of physicists reported a startling discovery. Neutrinos traveled faster than the speed of light by 60 billionths of a second in their 730-kilometer trip from Geneva to a detector in Italy. Despite 6 months of double-checking, the bizarre discovery refused to yield. But rather than celebrating a physics revolution, the researchers published a cautious paper arguing for continued research in an effort to explain the observed anomaly. In time, the error was tracked to a single incorrectly connected fiber optic cable. This example reminds us that real science is more than static textbooks. Instead, researchers around the world are continuously publishing their latest discoveries, with each paper adding to the scientific conversation. Published studies can motivate future research, inspire new products, and inform government policy. So it's important that we have confidence in the published results. If their conclusions are wrong, we risk time, resources, and even our health in the pursuit of false leads. When findings are significant, they are frequently double-checked by other researchers, either by reanalyzing the data or by redoing the entire experiment. For example, it took repeated investigation of the CERN data before the timing error was tracked down. Unfortunately, there are currently neither the resources nor professional incentives to double-check the more than 1 million scientific papers published annually. Even when papers are challenged, the results are not.
The sound or nor see the video. So
Yeah, that is very strange today. Everybody is sorry about that. There must be some hiccups in the system. But don't worry, because
sound came out.
yeah, I will send the link of the video to all of you later on, and then you can go through the videos yourself. I'm really sorry about that, but there must be some problems with GoToWebinar today. Okay. So I will make Chris as the presenter again. So Chris, I don't think we can play the second video, but
No.
I will send the link to the audience.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. So this video really just emphasized the importance of reproducibility. And this guy, this was another famous case where this was an economist, a group of economists published a paper which many countries based their economic policy on, and then this student found an error in that economic analysis, which actually made the original paper somewhat misleading. So there are real life examples of the importance of reproducibility. When I was doing some research for this presentation, I came across this really interesting initiative, the Malaysia Open Science platform. And there's some very nice text there, I think, about the importance of open science and making it research data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I think that's really important to be able to do that. And this is what open science is about. And again, at the bottom here, I mean, this is again from the Malaysia Open Science platform. It talks about without proper data sharing practices in place, there is a risk that the data can become redundant, and similar kinds of projects are funded more than once. So again, I think really important point to make. The Human Genome Project was an example where open science and open research actually facilitated collaboration. And there's a quote here from a lecturer at Uppsala University that was involved in that initiative, talking about the fact that there's huge media and public interest in the study that was enhanced by the paper being open access and readily accessible to all. Under Springer Nature, we've been involved in open access and open science for a long time, and it's really our mission is to help researchers advance discovery by making their findings accessible and understandable and discoverable, usable, reusable, and as shareable as possible. The open access movement started with a number of declarations. There was the Budapest Open Access Initiative that was funded by George Soros, a famous philanthropist. Then there was the Bastida Statement on Open Access Publishing and the Berlin Declaration on Open Access. And these three really key important documents all said about defining what it meant to publish a paper open access. And in fact, Biomed Central, part of Springer Nature, was involved in these initiatives right at the beginning. And then moving on from those first three declarations, that became the Panton Principles for Open Data in Science. And that was really extending open access to include the data that underpinned studies. And then finally, in December 2012, there was what's called the DORA statement. And the DORA statement was really about the issues around the impact factor and the fact that it was, generally speaking, the only metric that people used to take note of when assessing research impact and research importance. And they pointed out a number of issues with it, and that there was a lot of different types of metrics you can use to actually rate research. And the digital revolution really enabled a number of different types of metrics to be able to appraise research. So this is Springer Nature. This is a history of our open research involvement. We started with Biomed Central back in 1998, which was the first commercial open access publisher. And then over the years, we've developed into having policies now for data sharing, facilities to. We've got a preprint policy, which I'll touch on in a moment, and also we can offer to store data for you as well, and I'll touch on those issues as we go through. So what is open access? So as I mentioned at the beginning, there are two main types of open access. There's gold open access, and this is where papers are freely available immediately on publication on the publisher's website. And then there's green open access, often referred to as self-archiving or deposition. And this is where a version of the accepted version of the paper, not the publisher's version, but the author's accepted version, is made available in an institutional or subject repository. So let's look at Gold Open Access first. As I mentioned, Gold Open Access is making a paper published in a journal, this is the publisher's version, freely available immediately on publication. And you can publish a paper Gold Open Access in two types of journals. First is in a fully open access journal. So that's where all papers in that journal are made open access. And this generally comes with a fee that an author has to pay. And then there are hybrid journals. And the Springer has over 2,000 hybrid journals, as well as a number of fully open access journals. And a hybrid journal is where, generally speaking, the articles in that journal are subscription articles, but you can opt to pay a fee and make your article open access on publication. So it's not a mandatory thing. It's not like a fully open access journal where you, as an author, you have to pay a fee. With a hybrid journal, there is the option to pay a fee to make your paper fully open access. As I just mentioned in the previous slide, article processing charges are a common feature of Gold Open Access. And it's often referred to as a publication fee, which is charged to authors when their article is published. And it covers the cost of the publication process, including the copy editing, production, the marketing and promotion of the content, hosting and maintaining the integrity of the article, and of course, administering peer review. One thing to be aware of when you're publishing a paper open access, particularly if your funder, whoever is perhaps funding the fee, is any requirements regarding the license. So there are a number of different types of open access license, and different journals adopt different licenses. As you can see, there are various different conditions depending on the type of license. The two most common types of license are the CC-BY here and the CC-BY-NC. The difference between the two is that the CC-BY-NC prohibits any commercial use of the paper. Only allows unrestricted use to non-commercial uses. Most Springer journals have a CC-BY license, but there are some that are published under the CC-BY-NC. So take care to understand, if you're choosing an open access journal, which license that journal actually employs. So I think, to my mind, there are 5 reasons why you should choose immediate Gold Open Access. So 1, anyone can read your work. I know that if I do a literature search on a particular topic and a number of different articles, and some are behind a paywall in a subscription journal and some are fully open access, the fully open access papers are the ones that I go to first. So by having your paper open access, it facilitates the fact that anybody can read your work. There is evidence, as I will touch on in a moment, that it leads to faster impact and attention. Your paper gets noticed more quickly. There is evidence to show that there is a citation advantage to publishing open access. As I mentioned, evidence with the Human Genome Project to suggest that it leads to wider collaboration. And also you retain copyright for your work by publishing open access. So having suggested, the Gold Open Access is definitely the way to go, I do also want to touch on Green Open Access as well. As I mentioned, Green Open Access is called self-archiving or article deposition, is 2 other common names for it. And importantly, with Green Open Access, it's about depositing, as I mentioned, the author's accepted version of the manuscript. And if you can see in this slide, this is the same article. One is the author's accepted version here, and this is the final product or the final paper that was published in the journal. You can't self-archive this under Green Open Access. You can only archive your author's accepted manuscript. And it's generally speaking, you're only allowed to do that after a certain amount of time. And then generally speaking, Green Open Access is subject to an embargo period. So for example, if you published a paper in a subscription journal, so it wasn't open access, but you still wanted to facilitate access to your paper elsewhere by going down the Green Open Access route, you may well have to wait 6 to 24 months, and then you can archive your accepted version. You can't archive the journal version. There are a huge number now of open access repositories where you could possibly deposit your paper under Green Open Access, and this is a directory which will give you, you just need to browse, you can browse by country or browse by subject area, and you can find a suitable repository where you might want to archive your paper. I'd probably suggest not archiving it on, say, an author's own personal website, because that would limit its discoverability. A beauty of Gold Open Access is that it does really make your paper discoverable very quickly. So I mentioned with Green Open Access, there are, generally speaking, some restrictions on when you can actually archive your paper. And these are some examples from the Spring of Nature. So if you published a paper in a subscription, so Springer hybrid journal, you'd have to wait 12 months before you could then archive your accepted version, and you're able to put it into either an institutional or funder repository or on an author's website. So there are a number of different restrictions on Green Open Access, and it's important that you check those restrictions when you're publishing in a subscription journal. So why should you go under Gold Open Access rather than Green Open Access? Well, as I mentioned, it's available immediately on publication. If you publish Gold Open Access, it's a version of a record that's been made open, so it improves discoverability, etc. The integrity of the scientific record is maintained because the publisher is always making sure that the article is available for an archive properly. And as I mentioned, it provides a path to open science as well. I do want to emphasize that, I think sometimes there's a common misconception that publishing open access is some sort of inferior way of publishing paper. It's not. The well-regarded open access journals, quality is not sacrificed with Gold Open Access. It's the same peer review process, the same rigorous editorial process, and the same services are offered, whether or not you publish in a fully open access journal, a hybrid journal, or a subscription journal. Quality is not sacrificed at all. I mentioned earlier on that there's evidence to show that there's a significant advantage for open access articles. Some research that we did, Spring of Nature, 6 times more downloads, more citations, and more importantly, a metric that's gaining increasing attention, the Altmetric Score. And the Altmetric Score is in essence a measure of how much attention a paper is getting, whether it be in social media, whether it be in press releases or blogs. So I think it's one step better to my mind than, say, an impact factor, in that people are writing about your paper, people are other press releases about your paper. It really does signify that the paper's garnering a lot of attention. And of course, the use on social media and press releases and blogs, etc., is really facilitated by paper being made open access. It's very difficult to put a social media post out, for example, on a paper that's behind a paywall. And here is an example of a paper that that I published in one of my journals, and this is the this represents the score. It's quite a complex algorithm in terms of how you compute the altmetric score, but in essence, blogs and press releases get weighted more highly than a simple post on social media. This is quite a high score. So in terms of open access papers being published, this is, and I think Kent is going to talk about this in a little more detail than I am at the end of the presentation, but you can see there is a general trend within Malaysia to publishing more open access papers. This data was taken from the database that's used to compute the impact factor, and it's looking at the number of open access papers across obviously three countries in Asia. Malaysia has gone above 45% in these last 5 years. Singapore 50%, and Thailand 86%. And then interestingly, Germany 67%. This was a study that was done by Nature, and interestingly, they looked at which are the countries that really publish the most open access papers, and in fact, Indonesia came out on top, which I found was quite fascinating. I think that's probably reflects that there's a lot of local journals, open access local journals in Indonesia. That because I was very surprised to see that that was the top country in terms of open access data. So hopefully I've persuaded you that there are advantages to publishing open access, and that it is a growing and important trend, and more funders making open access mandates, and more and more countries expressing interest in publishing open access. It is important, though, to be careful about how you select an open access journal. As I mentioned right at the beginning, there are some what we call predatory journals that operate on an open access model, and it's important to avoid publishing in those journals. I think one of the points that I think that sometimes people get frustrated with desk rejects. So I would say that it's important not always to aim for the journal with the most impact factor. It's important to take a lot of issues into consideration when you're trying to choose a journal. I would suggest asking colleagues whether they've published in the journal, looking at the editorial board, seeing if the journal has published similar papers to yours. Have a look at your reference list. Once you've written a paper, check out the reference list and see which journals appear most often. So, as I mentioned, not all journals are created equal. Some of them have different copyright licenses. The amount of money that they charge you for open access varies quite considerably. The journal metrics alter or change between journals. Some journals are affiliated with societies. Some journals have a strong social media presence. So there are a lot of issues to take into consideration when you're trying to choose a journal. In terms of fully open access journals, there are a number of different resources you can go to find a suitable journal. Biomed Central has a list of journals and their article processing charges. There's a directory of open access journals, which I'll touch on in a moment. A number of different resources there that you can actually go and have a look at and decide which journal might be the best for your work. So I did a quick search in the directory of open access journals for journals produced in Malaysia that are published in the medicine field. And I came up with 12 journals there to suggest that in terms of publishing an open access paper. And then it's actually a really nice database, this DOAJ, because you can then click on the link here to the journal, and it gives you a lot of interesting information about the particular journal. So, for example, this journal, the Malaysia Journal of Medical Sciences, it gives you, the time from submission to publication, which is very quick, 9 weeks. Not many journals achieve that. They don't charge you publication fees. And they operate, remember we talked about the license, they operate under a CC BY license. So a lot of good information in this database, and I would suggest you go and have a look at that if you're thinking about choosing a fully open access journal for your work. So be careful about predatory journals, as I mentioned previously. And predatory journals are generally defined, if you like, when they ask you to submit a paper following questionable or non-existent peer review, and then ask you to pay an article processing charge to pay to publish the paper. Unfortunately, a lot of these journals have been set up in recent times, and yeah, it's important to try and avoid them. So how do you do that? Well, a number of different questions you need to ask yourself. Does the publisher allow you to retain copyright of your work? Do you recognize anybody on the editorial board? Is it a single publisher that releases an overwhelming large number of journals all at once? The website looks poor in quality, or there's no care and attention made to sort of the copy editing of papers. And you can, another database here, another link, thinkchecksubmit.org is another database that you can go and actually check whether find a journal, a reputable journal for your work as well. So there's DOAJ, and then there's thinksubmit.org. Also look for credible imprints. These are obviously the Springer Nature imprints, but there are other publishers as well that you probably recognize. So look for a publisher that you recognize when you're trying to choose a journal. And there's more information on this. If you're interested in publishing in Springer Nature journals, there's more information at this link that will give you a lot more information about the choice of journals that you might have. So having talked about open access, I think there are two, briefly want to talk about two other issues. One is preprints and data sharing. At Springer Nature, we encourage you to publish a preprint prior to submission of your article. It's not a barrier to publication. I think the advantage of that is that it gets your work out quickly into the public domain. There can be disadvantages in that the paper is not peer-reviewed, and sometimes the media can pick up on preprints and perhaps share information that has not been, obviously has not been fully reviewed. But I think overall, the advantages of preprints far outweigh any disadvantages, and so we would encourage you to use that service. And here is a database that we operate called Research Square, and that has a large number of reprints, and you can set up an account there and submit a preprint of your work prior to submitting your paper to peer review. Just a note about some of the preprint policies. You can choose the license you prefer for your preprint, whether it's CC BY, for example. You should cite the preprint in your submitted version of the paper as a reference. You can submit to any legal preprint platform. It doesn't have to be ResearchGate. And you can respond and clarify to the media if you're asked about any questions about a preprint paper. The other part of open science, the other cog of open science is data sharing, of course. And I think certain areas such as the medical field and health field are probably a little behind some other areas in terms of depositing data. But At Spring in Nature, we are moving towards every paper having a statement regarding whether the data are accessible and where the data can be found, and whether you give permission for people to access the data underpinning the study. If you are interested in whether, for example, some of you I may well get funded, the open access fee of a paper might get funded by some funder, then you can actually check whether the funder has any requirements around the different types of license to publish your open access paper. Remember, we talked about CC BY and CC BY NC. You can search in this database and it will tell you what the funder policies are. So I think this is just a nice overview of hopefully what I've emphasized to you today, that open access and open science has benefits for researchers in terms of increasing our visibility, increasing the discoverability of the papers, greater recognition, more citations and downloads. Has benefits for society as well, in that anyone can access your research and read it and understand it, hopefully. And there are benefits for research communities as well in terms of increased collaboration. This was a video which we're not going to show, but Mabel will actually send you the link to this.
Chris, maybe we should try, because the audience told us that they actually could hear our first video.
I could hear it as well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, maybe let me try this video too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hopefully that short video there has really convinced you that we're really committed at Springer Nature to open access publishing, and hopefully it'll persuade you to publish open access with us. Okay, Kent, do you want to take over?
Yep, sure. I am trying. Let me see. Let me know if you can see my full screen on my slides. Mabel, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can
Yep.
see your screen.
Okay, great. So thanks, Chris. I think that really gave everybody a good understanding of, especially between the differences of, the different routes of open access and how they both can play a role in, of course, expanding the visibility of research, particularly coming from, maybe smaller countries like Malaysia, for example, in putting the good work that's been done in Malaysia, for example, on the global level. What I wanted to present today is actually to give an audience some context in terms of what the relationship or the past performances of open access or of just publication in general between Springer Nature and, of course, Malaysian and more particularly UMT researchers, since everybody on the call today is from UMT. So just some context, so to speak. This data was obtained from a third-party source, so to speak, called Dimensions.ai. It's actually a free-to-use website. You can go in and obtain all of this data freely. But what I wanted to bring or to highlight was essentially just to show you over the past 4 years. So since this data is from 2018 to 2021, there are a few things to highlight here. Number one, all of this data is basically the representation of number of publications from Malaysian institutions or have representation from Malaysian institutions within articles published inside the Springer Nature Journals portfolio. So we have, I think if not mistaken, we publish over 3,000 different journals across different subject areas and across all of our different imprint or brands, so to speak. And if you notice, from 2018 to 2021, there has been a steady increase of not just publications overall. As you see, all of the bars are growing organically in that sense. But what's more important to also see is that the all OA number is also growing. So like what Chris has mentioned earlier, definitely this understanding or the acceptance of going open access is already, it's already in some ways ingrained into Malaysian researchers, so to speak, or we are familiar with the process overall. But I think if we drill down one level further, you will notice that the differences between gold and green OA is also there, and I think it's quite great. We are quite happy to see that there is still a more preference for gold OA as opposed to green. This really helps, I think, to bring everybody in line in terms of trying to gain visibility globally when we are trying to punch above our weight class in that sense. But with that said, I think there is still generally what is this, a 60-40 split or 55-45 split in terms of preferences by Malaysian institutions or Malaysian researchers, or there's more more preference in that sense to still publish in closed or traditional publication routes. So hopefully we will see a transition over time towards more OA publications. But it's just an interesting fact that I wanted to bring to attention. This slide, on the other hand, also again the data is taken from Dimensions.ai, shows more specifically article publications representation from UMT researchers. There's basically all of the publications that have at least one representation or one UMT researcher amongst the author list of each article. We can also see that there's a growing trend over the years to publish more and more in OA. I think this is generally in line with policies within the country, in the sense that we always want to, again, to increase the visibility of the research done in Malaysia or amongst universities. But I'm not quite sure whether or not if are they very strict are they very strong policies in place to support the researchers in order to make the next big push towards ultimately choosing OA as the preference for their publications. And I think we will try to identify that in the poll after this. But again, over time, we will notice that there is still definitely more preference to do publications if able to do it in open access. There seems to be more preference in doing it in gold open access, which is generally really good over the years. And for those who are interested to know, currently in the last 4 years, UMT researchers have been publishing a lot of work with us in Springer, again in the Springer Nature portfolio, primarily in the areas of biological sciences, engineering, chemical sciences, environmental sciences. And I think again this just goes to support the fact that the relationship between Springer Nature and UMT has been going on for quite a while, particularly that the researchers in the university have access to a lot of our resources in terms of journals, and they do match very nicely on with the focus areas of research within UMT itself. So very much in line with the work and the daily research that you guys are doing over there. And hopefully we will want to see more of these numbers growing over the years. And then finally, this is a very interesting number. So basically this is a slightly more drilled down representation of UMT researchers being the corresponding author or the main author, so to speak, when it comes to publishing the article. So these are the main authors or the ones who are actually going through the main peer review process with the editors, with the for example with the likes of Chris. And what we can find is that over the years, as you can see, fully open access publications have been growing, albeit still a very small number, but we can see there is genuinely an appetite for doing so over time. So again, comparing that to the likes of hybrid publications or subscription publications, that number is still definitely much smaller. But again, maybe with more activities or talks like this in the coming years, we will begin to see again a more preference for researchers from UMT to not only publish in open access, but also to perhaps choose the likes of Springer Nature being your preferred partner in order to look for homes for your articles, so to speak, when it comes to making that decision. Again, just as a word of clarification, on the left-hand side, you will see a few terms. So fully open access just basically means journals that are only accepting papers that will be published as open access articles. So they are a 100% OA journal. Subscription means for those who for journals that are not open access or do not offer an option to publish your content or your individual articles as OA. Hybrid open choice refers to journals that give you the option between publishing in the traditional route, in the sense that you still go through the peer review process, but not necessarily want to publish your article as an open access article. And we can see that out of 76 over the 4 years, only one author, so to speak, had chosen to go down that route, whereby he or she actually chose the article to be published as an OA article within a hybrid journal itself, whereas the other 75 actually chose the traditional route. So again, I think there are a lot of challenges there are a lot of reasons why this is so, and I think this general trend, so to speak, between the differences of OA versus traditional route publishing is quite evident in most countries in Southeast Asia, for example, except perhaps probably what Chris pointed out in Indonesia. That's probably because they also have a lot of homegrown or in-house journals that prioritize probably in their own language, so to speak, but also those that are more centered within the readership or the visibility is primarily localized in that sense. So with Springer Nature or the likes of publishers like Springer Nature, we offer a different kind of avenue, so to speak, for researchers having to want to have a greater global visibility in that sense. And again, hopefully with initiatives like this, what we're doing today, we will begin to see more researchers from UMT have a better understanding of what OA is, for one, and also knowing that, for example, Springer Nature is a reputable publisher that can work with you in that sense, or our editors like Chris will be able to guide you through that process as and when you need. And I just took the opportunity again to just highlight one paper that's actually gone through the full open access route. This paper was actually by Prof. Mohammad Azmuddin. I think this is a relatively new paper, only published sometime last year. And essentially, when they decided to submit for this paper in bioresources and bioprocessing, they already immediately understood that this paper is a fully open access paper, and then they still decided to go ahead with it for their own reasons, obviously. But it just goes to show that it's not something new for the likes of the researchers within UMT in general. But hopefully we will begin to see more of the likes of the researchers continue to go towards this route. And if you guys have any qualms, any questions, any doubts about the whole entire process, I guess opportunities like this, when it comes to actually meeting the likes of the editors themselves who run the papers, maybe not specifically this one I'm showing, for example, but people like editors like Chris, to be able to give you an understanding of what are there any doubts that you may have of going open access? Why should you do it? What should if you have a reason not to do so, can we address those reasons? Or but there is basically it's not OA is not a forced kind of thing. Of course, it's of course there are benefits to doing so, and I think there's a general trend in more developed countries, for example, to move towards that direction, all in the effort of again gaining more global visibility, to improve reproducibility of the research as well, and just overall adding towards the prestiginess of your work and your university that you represent over time. So hopefully some of that data would be raise a few eyebrows, and if you're interested to know more, again please put in your questions in the chat box so that Chris or I maybe can address them. And we're looking forward to working very much with UMT to see what else we can help to develop if it is the university's direction in heading towards that in the long term, so to speak. Yep. Mabel, do you want to run a poll, if I'm not mistaken?
Sure.
I'll stop sharing my screen, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thank Ken for the explaining of the open access and the situation or development in Malaysia. And after the whole presentation, we want to, at the end, understand your view on open access. And do you have any plan to publish in open access in the future? So we are going to launch 2 polls, and please help us, understand your situation when doing the open access publishing. So the first one is, do you plan to publish your next articles in open access journals, especially listening to Chris' presentation on the benefits of open access publishing? So we will give the audience some time. So just tick the box, yes or no. Anybody? Because I think I just received 1 response.
The poll will be seen in the presenter screen, if I'm not mistaken, or in the screen. So you just click onto the answer on the screen itself.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I stop or close this, poll questions. Oops. Share. So basically, I would say the feedback is not very reactive this way, but I do think the audience would like to publish OA in the future because this is what the trend is. But we also see some barriers or obstacles when you try to publish in open access journals. So the next question is, what is the biggest obstacle to prevent you from publishing article in open access? either it is yes or no, you still see some barriers or obstacles in front of your path to publish open access journals. So could you please just take the one which you think is the most or the biggest obstacle to you when you really consider publish in open access journals? Is it the funding? Because we have to pay article process charge if you want to publish in open access journals. Is it because there are too many publishers or journals outside that you don't know what to choose? Is it because the editorial process, you are so uncertain if it is the same as the subscription journals? Or is the government policy is not available at this moment, so you don't know whether you should publish in OA or not, or others? So we will give another 10 seconds to the audience. Okay, so sorry. So I will close this one. And not surprisingly, 67% voted the funding to pay the article process charge is the biggest obstacle. And then a bit surprising is the choice of publishers. I think maybe because of many publishers are launching OA journals, so they don't know really where they can find the right journals for their open access articles. Okay, so these are the two polls that we launched, and it really gives us some insights of how we should go together with you when publishing open access in the future, or how we should move forward with open access. So now is the time for questions. So if you have any questions for Chris or for Ken, please type in the question box. And for Chris, we already have some questions for you. Okay, so the first question is, are there any trade-offs for researchers that want to prioritize publishing in OA in terms of quality of the papers or manuscripts?
I'm not quite sure what they're referring to in terms of trade-offs. I think generally speaking, I would say that as a general rule, a lot of open access journals focus on publishing sound science. And in terms of choosing articles to put editors, the focus of editors of a number of open access journals are really focusing on publishing sound science, and readership interest isn't quite as an important factor in deciding whether to send a paper to peer review. Whereas with a subscription journal or hybrid journal, readership interest generally plays a little bit of a stronger role than a number of open access journals where they really just they're focusing on publishing sound science. But in terms of any trade-offs in terms of quality, there are no trade-offs in terms of the peer review process. It's the same high quality peer review process and publication process. And a Springer Nature, whether it's open access journal or whether it's a hybrid journal, they all go through the same process and the same quality of peer review.
Yeah, I think that is the meaning of the question,
Right.
because I've got another question which is pretty similar to this question, and it is like this. We understand we should not always look at impact factor, but sometimes we are asked to publish in first two quartile of journals. So are many OA journals also ranked in the first two quarters? I think this is about the quality. Is the quality as good as subscription journals?
Again, I think that depends on the area and the therapeutic area. Some fully open access journals are very well regarded, and some not quite so well regarded. but it's no different in subscription journals. You can get some subscription journals that are in the 4th quartile of the impact factor, and some in the 1st quartile. So you really need to check, and that data should be readily available on the publisher's website. Once you've chosen a journal, and I think even the Springer Journal Suggester, I might be wrong there, but I think it does tell you what quartile each journal is in and what the impact factor is of each journal. So you can see that information very readily.
Yeah. Just for the audience interest, we have Springer Journal Suggester that you can make use of to find the right journal for yourself. You just have to put in the title, your manuscript, abstract, and then choose whether open access or subscription model, etc., and subjects. And then there will be a list of journals available for you to choose from.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the impact factor is still important to people. Yeah, it's just a matter of life. Yeah, factor.
Okay. Can a manuscript that was previously published as part of a conference proceeding, that is not an OA, and then be further developed into a full original article and published as an OA paper later?
No, I think would be the quick answer to that. That would be a duplicate publication. You can't publish the same paper twice in two different journals. There's sometimes an argument for translate. So if the paper was published in English or in a local language, there can be an argument for translating that into the other language and publishing it. Again, that you have to get the express permission of the original publisher, and you have to go through several procedures in terms of back translation to make sure that the translation is accurate.
Okay, so we understand that is a no, but if it is like a revise the content and
it would have to be significant. Go on, Kaya. The content would have to be significantly different. Yeah, or as I said, you can make a case to an editor for translation.
Okay. So what are the general benefits for a faculty or university to choose OA as a strategy to improve their standing in the global R&D and academic realm?
I think hopefully, if you go back and think about some of the things I talked about, I mean, there's a lot of scientific literature being published, and it's really hard to make your paper stand out, if you like, from the rest of the papers. And by publishing it open access, making it readily available to people straight away, and the evidence does tend to suggest that it improves citations and improves downloads and improves discoverability of your paper. So it really gives you a chance to get ahead of your perhaps research competitors, etc., and get your research discovered quicker by people. And as I mentioned, if you do a literature search and you come on a certain topic and you come across several papers, the papers you're going to gravitate to are those that are open access. It's just the way it is. So I think that's the advantage. It's, as I said, increased discoverability, increased collaboration, increased visibility, increased citations, increased downloads.
Yeah, I think because in some countries there is no straight policy on OA transition, and that's why the academics are a little bit confused when they are forming or shaping their strategies on OA. Yeah,
I think that you need to look at the European countries and the US as well. They're really moving forward with open access, and unfortunately, if you don't get on, as a saying in English, if you don't get on the bandwagon, you're going to be left behind. It's you've really got to think. And I appreciate it's hard for a country that perhaps doesn't have the resources that some of the very rich, wealthy countries have. I think that is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. As an editor, do you make any preference with regards to deciding on which articles accept for publishing between articles that are going to be OA versus that authors prefer the traditional publishing route?
No, and that will be a conflict of interest. So
Mm.
I don't know whether the authors of a paper are going to elect open access until I've accepted the article. The process doesn't start, that choice doesn't start until the paper's been through peer review and I have accepted it. So no, absolutely not. And I don't want to know. To me, that's a potential conflict.
Sure. Okay, and there is a last question. So are there any differences in managing preprint and the final manuscript? I think maybe the way it's presented or writing style, I'm not so sure because it's just right
Okay.
this way.
Well, let me, a preprint is basically your author's own formatting. So say in Word, for example, in Word, that you put into a repository prior to any peer review, prior to any changes that happen in peer review, and then prior to any formatting or copy editing that the publisher might do. So it's very much just a Word document that's been submitted, for example, submitted to a journal. So it's a lot different to the finest polished publisher version of a paper.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have a policy on our website as well, and you also mentioned in your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So I think we are able to share this information later on.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
important to declare. It's important to declare that you have posted a preprint when you submit a paper.
Okay, and then I got another question. So a fully or hybrid OA journal, more or less, is it more or is it less likely to be indexed by index service like Scopus or JCR compared to traditional journals?
I would say not. I think that generally speaking, the criteria, I mean, if we talk about the impact factor and we talk about the Web of Science and the issues that they consider, it's generally not whether a journal's open access or not. It's more about the quality of the journal, the quality of the editorial board, the rigor of the peer review process. It's all about making sure that the papers that journal publishes are of high quality. And it may well be that they might even look at open access journals perhaps a little bit more carefully to make sure that they're not one of the so-called predatory journals. So they've got a set of criteria that they will apply across all journals, irrespective of whether the journal is open access, hybrid, or purely a subscription journal. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I would say, Mabel, is that if a fully open access journal, if the data is true and that open access papers do lead to a lot more citations, then that journal is likely to get indexed more quickly, say in the Web of Science, because the Web of Science look at those citations in a journal as a deciding factor as to whether to include them and give them an impact factor. You have to be in the first have to be in quartile 1 or quartile 2 of your category before you get indexed in the Web of Science.
Right. Okay. Do we still have any questions from the ground? Just type your question in the question box. Or Ken, do you have further questions for Chris or anything else?
I think, Chris, a question that often comes up when I meet researchers in this part of the world in Malaysia is always a question about APC or APC cost. So I think in most universities at the moment, there is not typically a centralized funding or centralized fund, so to speak, to take care of APCs, and researchers often are left to tend to themselves to either draw up from their own resources or their own funds, or they have to set aside some from perhaps their entire research fund, so to speak. So what are Springer Nature's policies in terms of about helping authors from probably this part of the world or the global south to manage that APC cost if it's necessary?
I think, I mean, Springer Nature has a list of countries that are eligible for waivers or discounts. I can't tell you off the top of my head what countries are on there, but it is publicly available, I think, on the Springer Nature website. And I think probably in the Biomed Central part, there is also a discretion from editors that they can offer so many waivers a year to authors that can't afford the fee. So there is that as well. But yeah, I appreciate it's difficult. And I think at Springer Nature, and Mabel, you might be able to say that we are conscious of that and looking at ways of helping and supporting authors to publish open access.
Yeah. We are finding many ways or try to, approach different funders or even governments to see how we can work together with the researchers and academians to make the APC lower, or how to, get a central funding in the future.
Yeah. There is a big variation in article processing charges, even in Springer Nature journals. So it's worth having a look around at the different journals and the different costs.
Yeah, and then I got another question from a PhD student. He or she asked, do we focus more, because he or she is still a PhD student, so should we focus more on conceptual or review papers instead of experimental ones? So what do you think? He or she asked this question because ask this question in terms of having higher citations.
So is the question, does original research or reviews give higher citations?
Focus more? Yes. Should they focus more on conceptuals or review papers instead of experimental papers?
Are they asking whether they should do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should they do more on conceptual or review papers?
I think it probably would depend on the area that they are working in. Generally speaking, I think good reviews can get cited well. In my area, the sort of papers that get cited well are tutorial or educational pieces, well conducted systematic reviews. But I think if I'd hesitant to suggest that you, as a PhD student, that you focus on citation chasing. I think, I think that's probably not quite the right policy. I think, I think it's best to try to focus on topics that are interesting, that are high interest at the moment.
She is in applied linguistic and education.
Yeah, not my field, but I think you need to need to focus on what people are interested in at the moment, in terms of if you want to chase citations and downloads and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can talk to your professor or because I think they know your subject area better.
And I guess sometimes it's a challenge between wanting to, like what Chris said about, are you really achieving what you're supposed to achieve as a PhD student in your field, as opposed to maybe chasing the number of citations because you have to meet certain requirements that are set upon you as a PhD student. So I think that's always a never-ending or an eternal challenge that young PhD students tend to face, particularly when it's such high competition in their field of research.
When the COVID crisis started, we got inundated with COVID papers, and I think that was some of that was citation chasing and down.
Yes. Somehow everybody made every paper related to COVID in that for some reason.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more questions coming in. So Chris, do you have the final words for the audience? tips or whatever that you want to share with the floor?
I think two things perhaps to emphasize. One, again, quality is the same in a well-regarded open access journal as it is in a subscription journal. You shouldn't have any concerns about the peer review process. And I think open access and open science is the way of the future. I think that's the way it's going. And to me, the sooner that you get onto that train, if you like, the train of open access, probably the better.
Yeah, thank you. And Ken, any words from you?
I would say, don't be afraid of OA itself. I think generally, like what Chris said, this is a trend that is happening around the world. Eventually, it will also probably take more emphasis here in Malaysia. Springer Nature is always welcoming to be able to assist universities or libraries with regards, or even you as individual users, if you have concerns or questions, or just wanting to know more, a little bit more about this trend in general. I think as a respectable or reputable publisher in the area of publishing, we strive to do the best for our community, and I think that is reflected in the good work that the likes of our editors like Chris do every day. So of course, I think the priority will always be good, sound research in that sense, and that's what we want to promote. But open access is, I would say, it's like the name of the game now or in the future, so to speak, in that sense. And we always want to provide an avenue that will be able to be.
Yep. Okay. Ken, we cannot hear you. Are you muted?
Yeah, no, he's gone completely. He's gone off on his
Yeah.
own.
Well, he even. Okay. Ken, stop. We cannot hear you. Okay, never mind. Yeah, he has problem in his headphone today.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So almost time, and thank you, Chris, and thank you, Ken, for the presentation. Great presentation today. So I'm closing the webinar today. So before we end, thank you once again for UMT Library support in organizing this webinar with us. We will collaborate and decide what other topics in the future which will be beneficial to all of you. After this webinar, there is a survey. So please fill in and help us understand what you think about this webinar and what other topics you would like to hear from us. A follow-up email will be sent to you tomorrow and with an e-certificate. So thank you and stay safe, everybody. Bye.